When Khalid ibn al-Walid reached the cultivated ground around Aqraba, he found Musaylama's forces already drawn up for battle. The fields and groves that fed Yamama now formed a patchwork of open lanes, orchards, irrigation ditches, and mud walls, terrain that favored defenders and punished any undisciplined advance. Khalid surveyed the ground carefully. His instinct was never to rush. He understood that victory was not simply won by courage, but by structure, cohesion, and timing. Both armies formed up shortly after dawn. On Khalid's side, the veterans of Medina, Mecca, and the tribes that had rejoined during the march took their positions in ordered ranks. Zayd ibn al-Khattab held a critical role on the right, his line composed of fighters hardened from earlier campaigns. On the left stood mixed contingents from the Hijaz and Yemen, many of whom were skilled archers capable of disrupting enemy formations before close contact. Khalid himself kept a reserve, a body of cavalry and elite infantry just behind the center, ready to reinforce any weak point or exploit a sudden opening. Facing them stood the massed warriors of Banu Hanifa. Theirs was not an irregular mob, but a force built around clan cohesion and home-ground morale. Musaylima positioned himself behind the forward ranks, surrounded by trusted men of his own clan, confident that the thick groves behind them offered both cover and fallback positions. His fighters stretched across the irrigated plain, their numbers forming a deep center with strong flanks anchored on farm walls and orchards. Their confidence was visible. They shouted to one another, striking shields and spears, for they knew they fought for land, for tribe, and for the survival of their leader's authority. The battle began not with reckless charges, but with measured missile fire. Arrows hissed across the narrow fields as both sides tested range and discipline. The first casualties were light, but carried a psychological weight, reminding each line that the day would not be decided at a distance. Then, with a shouted command, the infantry lines advanced. In close combat, the contrast between the two armies showed immediately. Khalid's front ranks maintained cohesion, shifting as a single body, shields forward, spears leveled. Their discipline allowed them to absorb the initial shock and return it in kind. But Banu Hanifa's warriors pressed forward with ferocity and familiarity with the terrain. They fought in dense knots of clan brothers, each group anchoring around the other, and their knowledge of the fields allowed them to pivot and withdraw through narrow lanes without losing formation. For a time, neither side broke. The dust, the shouting, and the clatter of spears on shields blended into one continuous roar. Men in the front ranks grappled, stabbed, fell, and were replaced by those behind them. Khalid rode along the lines, shouting orders and adjusting formations, preventing any collapse in cohesion. Musaylima's approach revealed itself as the morning wore on. Instead of seeking a quick, decisive victory, his line gave ground slowly, drawing Khalid's infantry deeper into the groves and irrigation channels behind Aqraba. This slow, staged withdrawal exploited the defenders' familiarity with the terrain, threatening to split the attackers into fragmented pockets. Khalid countered by ordering his flanks to hold alignment and refuse deep pursuit, preserving the shape of his line. The battle surged back and forth as the sun climbed higher. When one side gained a few paces, the other responded with renewed shouts and charges. The swords grew slick, the shields dented, and the edges of the groves filled with wounded men seeking shade and water. Chroniclers emphasize the shock among Khalid's veterans at the resistance they encountered, noting that no other rebel force in the Ridda had yet matched this level of cohesion. By mid-morning, Khalid's center had advanced far enough into the cultivated zone that visibility was limited and coordination grew difficult. The orchards, channels, and low walls worked like a maze, breaking lines into smaller clusters that had to fight almost independently. It was then that Musaylima's warriors, seeing the opportunity, tightened around their leader,